Matt Campbell absolutely has to keep this group of players at Penn State, but also target these former Iowa State players in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Sako, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcasting network out there. Plenty to discuss on today's show as we got the latest tangible portal moves that have actually happened over the weekend. Also the rumors, because people are changing their social media, so we got to read into it. Iowa State players have already declared their intent to go into the transfer portal. Which players is Matt Campbell going to target from his former team? But first, we got to talk about the players that he has to keep that are already in Happy Valley. Today's show is brought to you by Rugiet. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Okay, Ethan Grunkemeyer, right? Andrew Rapplier, Luke Reynolds. Who are the players that Penn State, Matt Campbell, must keep in Happy Valley? I'll talk about both the offense and the defense. I got to start with Ethan Grunkemeyer because as we get to the next segment, Rocco Becht, right? Which quarterback is Penn State going to go with? Reports have said that Rocco Becht intends to follow, right? That all signs lead for Rocco Becht to join and follow Matt Campbell. Offensive coordinator is there, quarterbacks coach is there. It makes a ton of sense. But it also makes a ton of sense for Penn State and Matt Campbell to build around Ethan Grunkemeyer. I've laid this out, that you got 3 years of eligibility for Ethan Grunkemeyer. So you have your starter for potentially, if he does go into the NFL, right? But at a maximum of 3 years, at a minimum 2. I mean, how could you not? He had an incredible performance in the bowl game. We all saw it in a cold weather game where you're throwing pretty much a rock in wind, rain, sleet and rain on and off. And he put together a performance where he completed nearly 70% of his passes, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers against Clemson, arguably the best team that Penn State played down the stretch. And he put together his best performance to kind of cap off this season. I am good with Penn State building around Ethan Grunkemeyer, but I also think that you win either way with either quarterback in the short term, right? Rocco Becht has 1 more year of eligibility. Grunkemeyer has 3 more. But you also have to consider the quarterback depth chart, okay? What I am not content with, what I am not good with, is having Ethan Grunkemeyer and 2 unproven true freshmen as your backups. By declaring Ethan Grunkemeyer as your quarterback, you also limit what you can do with the depth chart because no one is going to come in and just sit behind Grunkemeyer. Well, there's a select few, right? But how many of these kinds of players are out there? Journeyman quarterbacks that are simply looking to be QB2. You would have to pay a veteran to be QB number 2. So understand, if you're going to go with Grunkemeyer, you got to find a journeyman veteran, the NFL equivalent, right, of that journeyman backup that is willing, and you got to do that year after year after year. I suppose, hey, Peyton Falzone and Casey Evans, those 2 true freshmen that I'm referring to, get another year of eligibility, but if they know they're not going to start at Penn State, eventually they're going to hit the transfer portal and you're going to lose that depth. So it's a rock and a hard place situation with keeping Ethan Grunkemeyer, which is why Rocco Becht, but also Alex Mansky makes sense. So I want to start there, just kind of laying out that Penn State can succeed with both paths. Keeping Ethan Grunkemeyer, but no, you might compromise the depth chart. You get possibly a 2 quarterback deal in the portal with 2 former Iowa State quarterbacks, which we'll talk about at length in the upcoming segment. Players that you do want to keep as a supporting cast. This is the core that you build around. I got to start at tight end because Andrew Rapplier put together a phenomenal season down the stretch. He was the go-to guy. He was Ethan Grunkemeyer, one of Ethan Grunkemeyer's favorite targets, it seemed, but you don't have Trevor Pena returning, right? You don't have any of those veteran receivers. Andrew Rapplier is a guy that I believe can be a captain for Penn State. I also wouldn't mind if Penn State and Taylor Mauser as the new OC are going to run 2 tight end formations. Keep Luke Reynolds. Look, I know he was disappointing this season. I get it. However, he still has a ton of upside. He was a 5-star talent for a reason. Taylor Mauser is also going to be the tight ends coach. So somebody who has put a few tight ends in the NFL himself, kind of has a similar track record as Ty Howell did. I don't think there's much that separates Mauser and Ty Howell, who's now at Virginia Tech, Penn State's past tight ends coach. They're not that far off from one another as a position coach. So I think Luke Reynolds with somebody else to kind of help unlock the blocking ability, get him to be more polished as a wide receiver, and keep that tandem of Andrew Rapley and Luke Reynolds as a veteran tight end duo together would set up any quarterback for success, especially when the wide receiver room is supposed to turn over. I'll keep with the offense here. Anthony Donko on the offensive line and Cooper Cousins. You at least need 2, preferably 3, right? I could throw TJ Shanahan in there as well because those are your veteran offensive linemen. I do think a lot of offensive linemen, or a number of offensive linemen, I shouldn't say you're going to build an entire starting 5, but if you can get a couple of players from Iowa State, you can keep Anthony Donko and Cooper Cousins at a minimum for Penn State. Okay, the battle is won in the trenches. Most coaches are going to say that. Honestly, all coaches might say that when it starts up front. Anthony Donko was arguably your best offensive lineman for the past 2 seasons when he's been healthy. You have to keep him. Cooper Cousins, Pennsylvania guy, former 5-star, high-end 4-star. When you look at the consensus ratings, he can be your starting center next season. Nick Dawkins is going off to the NFL. You need to keep these players around because the offensive line is another position group that is completely turning over. Before I get back to the offense, I want to go to the defense real quick. Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas. That's your dynamic duo at linebacker. What is Penn State going to run? Well, to be determined with the defensive coordinator search. If and when it's potentially D'Anton Lynn, Lynn's going to bring over a 4-2-5 hybrid type of defense, okay? Penn State is going to run a 4-2-5 base again. You need your starters right there at linebacker. I don't really want to go into the portal to find 2 brand new linebackers, especially if they haven't played in a 4-2-5 defense. You know that Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas have the chemistry. They can cover sideline to sideline. It's simple. That is your priority on defense, to focus there. Of course, defensive line is going to be huge, but that's why you look to former Iowa State players and potentially players at other schools. Kobe Howard. Kobe Howard's an obvious one when the wide receiver core is going to completely flip over. You don't have a lot of class of 2026 commitments here. Kobe Howard can be a wide receiver 1. He can be the focal point in your passing game, on the boundaries, in the slot. Howard's your guy to keep around, and whatever quarterback, Grunk, backed, can use a player like him. And then there are 2 other players in the secondary that I think are must keep for Penn State. Again, there are a lot of players that I like, but if I wanted to focus on and give or take 10 to 12 here, King Mack in the defensive secondary, also Darius Dixon. I think these guys are star players. I also think King Mack has the potential to be a captain, a leader on this defense. I would focus on them. Don't forget, special teams can win and lose you games. Ryan Barker was the definition of efficient over the past couple of seasons. Ryan Barker, just enjoyed listening to his interview post-game after the Pinstripe Bowl. You want somebody that's automatic. I've said that, hey, at least Ryan Barker's automatic. You want that at kicker. You don't want to you don't want to take the chance that somebody's a liability out of the transfer portal when you have somebody as reliable as Barker. Okay, so there are tons of players at Penn State that you would want to stick around. So I know not everybody is going to agree with this shortened list. There are names that I've left off, but we got to talk about priorities. I can't just name everybody. Same thing goes for Iowa State. A number of former Iowa State players are already in the portal, and Penn State, Matt Campbell should definitely target them to complement the players that I want to see stay in Happy Valley. Who are those guys? Well, Rocco Becht, Alex Mansky, we got to start there. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. It's stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under the tongue so it absorbs fast. The science behind Rugiet Ready stands out. Those 3 clinically proven ingredients, all in one formula, designed for both mental and physical readiness. You can connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That is RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network out there. If you haven't already, go check out our all-new Everydayer Club. As a member of the Everydayer Club, you'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Nittany Lions compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. You will also get an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. Go to LockedOnNittanyLions.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. If Matt Campbell's not going to go with Ethan Grunkemeyer, then this conversation picks right back up with Rocco Becht and Alex Mansky. I've said this before and I'll reiterate it again. If it is a one-to-one comparison, who am I taking? Ethan Grunkemeyer for the next 2 to 3 years or Rocco Becht for 1? It's an easy choice. It's Ethan Grunkemeyer. Go find that veteran journeyman quarterback. However, if you're able to get Rocco Becht and Alex Mansky, that is the backup quarterback. He's going to be a redshirt freshman. If you look at the On3 rankings and if you look at the 24/7 rankings, they will justify this. It's not just about keeping a quarterback. Oregon executed this similar blueprint. You got your starting quarterback for the short term while also getting somebody that could develop, just sit, learn a little more, that had a high ceiling, but just needed some more time to season. That was Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore. And look how it has worked out for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. You can do something similar here by getting Rocco Becht and Alex Mansky, but that's the plan that's contingent. So if Ethan Grunkemeyer is not the guy, if he's going to go into the portal, maybe he and Matt Campbell had a conversation, didn't see eye to eye. Again, I want to refer to something that Brian Smith, recruiting expert, transfer portal expert, has brought up a ton. Players do commit to coaches, okay? James Franklin, Danny O'Brien are at Virginia Tech. Ethan Grunkemeyer, that's going to be of interest to him. The same reason why, right out of the gate, I said it. Rocco Becht's offensive coordinator, his head coach, may I mind you, and his quarterback coach are all in Happy Valley. It makes sense for both Rocco Becht and Alex Mansky to come over to Penn State. And then you have a quarterback depth chart. You have 4 options. So if Rocco Becht gets hurt, you got a guy that has already a year of development under his belt that's ranked in the top 10 of quarterbacks right now, according to On3. You could potentially land 2 top 10 quarterbacks out of the portal so that you're not relying on true freshmen if Ethan Grunkemeyer were to go down or whatever starter. It's about building out the QB depth chart. So I do not want Rocco Becht without the other quarterback, without the other signal caller in Alex Mansky. It has to be a package deal here. Okay, then I'm just going with Ethan Grunkemeyer. So if it's just Rocco Becht, you still got it. It still doesn't solve the other issue of getting another reliable backup. So that's what Penn State's looking for. It's not just about keeping one QB, finding the starting QB. It's about building the depth. You need 2 quarterbacks if you're Penn State. And hey, I'll throw this out there, but it is going to be difficult to convince him because he's started 7 games now. He's looked pretty darn good. Saying to Grunkemeyer that we'll create a QB battle and you can battle Rocco Becht for the starting spot. I don't think that's going to go over well. For either QB, for Rocco Becht going into one more season, he's going to want to be the guy. I don't blame Grunk for wanting to be the guy either. So that's the situation at QB. You got to go offensive line from Iowa State. The one player that I am definitely targeting is Brendan Black. He's been a 3-year starter at guard. He's entering the transfer portal with Penn State's offensive line just basically flipping over completely. You don't know if you're going to keep Cooper Cousins. You don't know if you're going to keep, again, at the time of this conversation, we're going to learn more day by day by day, hour by hour. But with what you're already losing on offensive line, you need a bona fide starter. This guy, massive, moves really well, excellent run blocker, perfect for Big Ten football. He is a Big Ten caliber player. Not to, oh, he's just kind of a holdover in the Big 12. How good can he actually be? No, Brendan Black, that's somebody that you can build the offensive line around. If we're sticking with the offense here, how about some skilled guys? Running back room might completely turn over as well. I didn't include Quentin Martin. I didn't include Corey Smith. Again, priority guys, because someone like Carson Hansen is in the transfer portal. Hansen, leading running back at Iowa State, knows the offense very well. Not almost 1,000 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. This is a plug and play starter. Okay. So if you're going to lose Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, it's not ideal and honestly not my preference, but this is somebody that you target, and maybe you keep one of those two. Maybe you keep Quentin Martin and you add Carson Hansen. Maybe it's Corey Smith and you add Hansen as well. I think that's a player that you need to go with. And I think we can all agree that Penn State is going to want to go after a wide receiver, probably multiple, and they're not going to be able to get everybody. There's not a trio of wide receivers from Iowa State that are waiting to basically take over the wide receiver room at Penn State. And what I mean is there's not 3 clear-cut starters that can just immediately come from Ames, Iowa to State College, Pennsylvania. The one wide receiver that I am targeting, if I'm Matt Campbell, is Brett Eskelson. Eskelson, a reliable guy, definitely not somebody, again, ideally you would like to keep Kobe Howard to be your number 1. This is your second or third target in the wide receiver room. Veteran, put up over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. Again, not a volume type of guy. He's a secondary option, but definitely the one player that I'm trying to bring over. Noah Pauly's the wide receivers coach. Excellent wide receivers coach. This is not going to be a position group of issue anymore. And they're going to have to go beyond what's at Penn State, what's at Iowa State to really round out this wide receiver room. But this is a player that I'm certainly, again, you're losing Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson. You're probably going to lose some other guys to the transfer portal. Hopefully not Kobe Howard, which we'll talk about more in the final segment there. Because like I said, the social media, we're going to read into it, right? Eskelson, quality veteran wide receiver that you do want in your room regardless, but more so as a secondary option. Okay, if Penn State has some moves over at tight end, say Luke Reynolds moves on or Andrew Olish, okay? I'm hoping they can really keep Andrew Rapplier, but they still want a dynamic duo at tight end. Ben Bramer, you are not going to see much of a drop-off if you are able to plug and play, if you have to go that route. So if you keep Andrew Rapplier and Luke Reynolds, Bramer doesn't become as much of a need, but say you lose one of them. Oh, gosh. God forbid you lose both. Ben Bramer is going to be somebody that becomes almost a must-have above all else, because he is your security weapon. He is somebody that you can throw to just over the middle, look to on third downs. Great blocker. Ben Bramer is somebody that you definitely want over from Iowa State. Then on the defense, 3 secondary guys have entered the portal. So Penn State is in, fortunately, a win-win situation where you already have so much talent at cornerback and safety potentially returning. You have a nucleus, but we've already seen A.J. Harris announce his intentions to go into the transfer portal. It's going to be okay at the end of the day. If they do happen to lose the guys that I've already mentioned, Darius Dixon, King Mack, it's not the end of the world, because Jeremiah Cooper, Jontez Williams, Marcus Neal are all in the transfer portal. Those are players that are all, I've made the argument already that Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams were Iowa State's best defensive players overall. If you're tracking their roster from a season ago and you had to rank all of them, Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams were the 1A and 1B on that defensive roster. But ironically enough, they both got hurt, and everyone will point to, they both got hurt in I think it was week 4. It was leading up to the Arizona game where one player got hurt in the practice leading up to that game. And then the next guy, they both tore their ACLs in the practice and then another player in the game. Talk about bad luck. You get Cooper, you get Williams, you have two instant starters in the secondary, or you just add more depth. Marcus Neal is another player that stepped up in the absence of Jeremiah Cooper. He was the leading tackler on this Iowa State defense, so he's good in coverage, but he's even better when he's able to put his helmet around the football. He's just able to track the ball carrier. He's got great vision out there on the football field. So if Penn State has a significant amount of turnover in the secondary, don't worry, because Penn State can just target three plug-and-play starters right there who are all conference caliber, yes, at the Big Ten level, with Jeremiah Cooper, Jontez Williams, and Marcus Neal. Know those three names, okay? And then you got to look to the defensive line. Ikenna Eziogu, Iowa State defensive end. He was a 2-year starter. Penn State's entire starting defensive line. Denai Dennis Sutton, Zariah Fisher, two defensive ends. I didn't know that Fisher had any more eligibility left, but he's announced his intentions to go into the portal. Again, we'll talk about that in segment 3. But Eziogu, similar to the players that I described from the Iowa State secondary, he's a plug-and-play defensive end. You want him to start what the room has, but Penn State has a major need at defensive line. He's one name. Penn State's going to have to target other players from other places to really round out the defensive line. That's going to be one of my main concerns if Penn State doesn't make a splash in the portal. They're going to have to, because they're losing Coleman, they're losing the veterans. You got to be able to retain players like Yvonne Kamaju, Max Granville, and then go and add someone like Eziogu from Iowa State. Okay, so that's the list for Penn State and Iowa State. Now we get to the moves that are actually happening or potentially in the process of happening. And of course, we're in this day and age of social media. Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell, and Kobe Howard are subtly making their thoughts known. Does it mean they're leaving? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to speculate about it coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame. A limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action even starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing for NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before that window closes. The timing is perfect. It's right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, let me catch everybody up here. These are the moves that have actually happened, and at the time of this recording, I'm surprised that nobody else has jumped into the transfer portal. I really thought after the Pinstripe Bowl ended, we would see basically a dozen plus names enter into the portal, but not the case. We only had one brand new name, and that's Zariah Fisher. I had no idea that he had any eligibility left. I had said, hey, he's going off to the NFL. You look at everything, off-season, preseason, every conversation I had about the defensive line had me projecting Zariah Fisher going to the NFL. He's still got a year of eligibility left. I don't know anymore. I can't make predictions or any sort of judgments here. I guess it has to do with the injuries. And of course, I'm going to wish any of these guys the best. I want them to succeed. Zariah Fisher, clearly that case. He's never been able to stay healthy. And a fresh start for him, probably going to end up at Virginia Tech, if I'm being honest. Maybe South Carolina, since Deion Barnes. That's where he's headed to be their defensive line coach. So Zariah Fisher has more eligibility. It makes sense for him to stay in college football for another season. Smith Vilbert had 7 years of eligibility. Now Zariah Fisher, same case here. I just for his sake, I hope that he can stay healthy. AJ Harris announced his intentions, in case you missed that, starting caliber cornerback that just didn't fit into Jim Knowles' defense. That's a man-to-man coverage guy. He's not, he's a press man corner. Zone coverage, not his strong suit. So if he can find a defense that utilizes his talents a little bit better, again, same thing, fresh start, because he went from being potentially a first-round pick to getting benched in favor of Darius Dixon and some other younger cornerbacks. A fresh start's definitely needed for him. Other names that we've seen enter the portal: Daniel Jennings, true freshman defensive end from the state of, he's a West Virginia native. Linebacker Kari Jackson. We've seen Chaz Coleman, of course, Alex Birchmeyer, cornerback Elliott Washington. A lot of defenders here. We've seen a lot of defensive players. And remember, Joey Schlaffer entered his name really early, or at least announced his intentions when he moved away from the roster. He had left the team early. So notice how there are a number of defensive players that have moved on to this point. Again, expect to see more, because now we get to the social media drama. And we got to read the tea leaves. Hopefully we don't read too much into it, or we don't. Again, this is all speculation here, but I want to offer my 2 cents. Kobe Howard went from changing a pretty cool picture of him in his uniform for the Pinstripe Bowl, and then 3-4 hours later, completely blacked out his social media. Just a profile picture that's just a black background, and then in his social media banner, it just says God's plan. He's taking a page out of Tony Rojas's playbook, because Tony Rojas has done that. And so he's done that, I think, almost every offseason. And Amari Campbell has done that now, where they basically put these all black backgrounds for their social media pictures. Okay, this is where we are in the modern age of sports. Professional sports players do it. College football players do it as well. Does this automatically indicate that Penn State is going to lose these players? Technically, not necessarily, but it is not, let's just say this, it is a negative indicator more than it is a positive indicator, okay? That's just logically speaking. I do find it really interesting that Kobe Howard went from basically promoting Penn State, that he made his profile picture him decked out in his uniform, getting ready to play in the Pinstripe Bowl, to completely wiping everything. Tony Rojas, he hasn't played a football game since Oregon, okay? Here's what I'll say about Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell. That is a package deal. Whether they end up at Penn State or not is to be determined, but I think one way or another, Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas are going to be playing football together at some university. Is it going to be Penn State? I would hope so. I said that Penn State should prioritize Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell, because you're not going to find 2 all conference caliber linebackers just like that out of the portal unless you're lucky. You have them at Penn State, find a way to keep them, right? And there's nobody at Iowa State that compares. Nobody. So that's why Rojas, and I should have probably stated that earlier, nobody compares at Iowa State. There's not an immediate replacement. But Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell, they're a package duo. You're not keeping one without the other. Virginia Tech makes a ton of sense since James Franklin's over there. They're also both from Virginia originally. Part of the reason that Amari Campbell came to Penn State is because of that Virginia connection with Tony Rojas. There were the rumors, message boards, social media, whatever, however you want to frame it, that Tony Rojas, because he spends so much time in Miami, Florida, that he's going to end up with the Miami Hurricanes. Okay, well, then that means Amari Campbell is going to follow him down to South Beach. At the end of the day, the only thing I can guarantee pretty much is that Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas are going to play football together. Hopefully that's at Penn State. It might be at Virginia Tech. I would also throw Miami of Florida into the mix just because of the other, right? There's no other school that's been linked. It's not like, oh, USC is an immediate target for Tony Rojas. No, he's always been linked to the Miami Hurricanes. Okay. That's why I refer to that school. For Kobe Howard, you don't know. You don't know how that conversation went with the coaches. You have to wonder, are there NIL negotiations? What is going on at this point? This isn't your everyday college football. And the problem here is that Penn State fans, myself included, covering the sport, we are not going to be used to this because this is not the routine. Everything that we've seen with the transfer portal and the NIL era has been fairly status quo. James Franklin did not have a lot of portal activity. So you are going to see a lot of players depart and a lot of players come in because that's just the nature of the situation that they're in. And I don't necessarily mean to describe it as a problem. I just think what our expectations are and how we have to approach the situation is going to be different because it's so new. It's brand new. So as my light dies over here on the side, runs out of battery, I think that's a fitting way to end today's show. If you're listening on the audio side, my light ran out of battery, ran out of juice. So that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for joining me on the show. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. We're going to have every single conversation with players leaving, players joining Penn State. It's all going to be right here. You're going to get total comprehensive coverage around the transfer portal. So if you're new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.